To Account-Based Friday. A little change of plans for today. Unfortunately, our wonderful guest, Jaap Westrick, got called away at the last minute and was unable to join us. But we know a few of you were kind enough to sign up and join us today, and we wanted to, one, let you know, because it truly was a last-minute unavoidable issue. So we wanted to let you know in person for those who are kind enough to join. And second of all, we wanted to let you know that we're really excited about the topic that we were going to cover today of thinking about how to make the most of any reforecasting you might be doing for second half. But Jaap is also throwing in a bonus topic of how to make the most of, as we're all heading into planning season for 2026, many of us over the summer. And he's got, I think, some really great perspectives and recommendations for how to maximize that. As he says, the trifecta of CMO, CRO, and CFO coming together, and CEO for that matter, coming together to make the most of strategy and planning and making sure that you've got forecasts in place that everyone can understand and support. So we'll be doing that on Wednesday, June 4th at 3:30. So we'll send everybody an updated link and information about that session, just as we were going to hold today. And we're looking forward to that conversation. But in the meantime, John and I thought we would just recast today as an Ask Us Anything kind of session. And John has just come back from a couple of really exciting events. So John, we're excited for you to kind of give us the download for those of us who were not able to attend some of those things. And we also want to make sure we call your attention to a few resources and some amazing data that a couple of our friends of Account-Based Friday have been publishing lately. That I think is actually also really useful given the topic we were going to cover today of thinking about second half updating targets and reforecasting and thinking about going into next year and how to have a realistic perspective on what's happening in the market and what your peers and others are doing. And so we wanted to call your attention to those as well. So for those who are here, thank you. For those who are expecting something completely different, thank you for your patience. And hopefully we will see you on Wednesday and send you that updated information. But in the meantime, John, would love for you to just give us a little bit of the update on what you've been seeing and hearing at several really cool events this week.
Yeah, no, thanks. And this is a unique opportunity here. I'm a guest on my own podcast. So my mom was pretty proud before, but she's going to be really proud that I was a guest on my own podcast, if she could figure all that out. So, or vlog or whatever you want to call this. But yeah, no, it's been an exciting week. And I just got back from New York City, of which I used to live not too far from New York City. So it's kind of like my going back to some old stomping grounds. And there were a couple key events that I went to. One was Ray Reich's event, which was Ray runs Benchmark, which was primarily a CFO, PE, VC audience. In fact, I think there were probably two others that were marketers in that audience. But I intentionally went to it because I know with a lot of our clients, we're really trying to wrestle with that conversation between CMO or head of marketing and finance and what that dialogue is like. So I really wanted to kind of marinate in that mindset because things have changed here so rapidly. And there were a couple of key takeaways, which I'll drill into. And then the other event that I popped into was Salesforce Agent Force, which is part of their world tour. And they did a hard pivot toward AI and was eye-opening, which we can dive into. But going back to Ray's conversations, great conversations in terms of kind of getting a fresh outlook as far as what's going on with reforecasting, budgeting, the latest benchmarks. It was very SaaS oriented, and I learned a ton as part of that. Now, I've got a finance undergrad, so I'm probably more quantitative than most in the marketing field. So for me, like I was geeking out about it. But Ray actually started off with Jocko from Winning by Design and talking about what's happening in the AI growth space, meaning not necessarily people adopting AI, but AI companies like Claude and anybody that's doing AI related work. How are they able to grow? And it's a lot different model than, say, a traditional B2B with sales in the field. He talked a lot about what I think was the word of mouth type influencer, where he really said that these AI companies are looking to penetrate a user in a company and get them successful in their use case, and then by word of mouth adopt, and kind of this flywheel effect of building a community of successful users and then doing the expansion. And firsthand, because you worked there for a project or two or three at Winning by Design, where they really emphasize the other side of the bow tie, which is the expansion side. And that's kind of the philosophy that he was talking about, of entering in with one user and then expanding to the entire company. So that was pretty fascinating.
Well, and I'll pause on that just for 1 second.
Sure.
Because first of all, I think for folks who are students of the game of all things B2B go to market, Jocko and Winning by Design have created some amazing resources, truly helpful, truly practical. But to your point, John, one of the things that when you work at Winning by Design, when you really start to learn about is this idea of the only thing that really matters in the end is impact. Right? We're not talking about an abstract ROI. We're not talking about value in some, sort of general sense. We're saying, did you deliver meaningful impact to the customer? And I think it's, it can take different forms, and there are actually some fascinating resources in terms of the kinds of impact that people might be looking for, maybe financial, rational, emotional, like there's all sorts of, things that impact can be. But the bottom line is, you don't get permission to stay or to grow unless you deliver impact. And really, not focusing on what that impact looks like is, I think, a lot of companies' first mistake. It's not about how cool your product is. It's about if, when it gets into the hands of the customer, they actually get something from it that matters. and I think that's where I think it's interesting to hear that that's kind of the focus that he sees for these AI companies is that heavy emphasis on winning permission to grow because you did something useful and you made an impact on the business. So, I mean, I love hearing that because I think every company ought to be focused on it. But I'm glad, Jocko continues to be out there. And it sounds like Winning by Design had a fabulous event as well of their own, which I was really excited to see. There's some just great, really good thinking happening there. So I encourage people to check out the Winning by Design website and another website, thescienceofrevenue.com, which has a lot of their resources on it too. We'll put some links in the comments after this to some of these great resources. And as well, I mean, Ray Reich's benchmark resources are amazing. So good, such helpful benchmarking. Anyone who needs credible, carefully gathered numbers should definitely check that out.
Yeah, Ray really capped the entire discussion with his benchmarks, and I think he just released them yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. And there were a bunch of them. The ones that jumped out at me the most was the slowing of growth has happened, and it's hard to explain without the visual, but if he looks at a lot of the quartile performance, top quartile and bottom quartile performance, and you could see in his graph how through the quartile year over year, before tariffs, when the benchmarks were produced, year over year, you can see the slowing of growth being pretty dramatic. The interesting thing is the arithmetic mean, or the average, was the same year over year in terms of company growth of 26%, or somewhere in that order of magnitude. And so on balance, companies on the surface look like, SaaS companies in particular, are performing okay, but in reality, the whole kind of quartile shifted, which means the top performers are really performing well to kind of carry that average up, or to sustain the average, given that the majority of people have shifted downward in growth. So it's like, I hate to use this analogy, but it's almost like the rich get richer kind of thing. So the top 2 or 3 or 4 companies are doing phenomenally well, and everybody else is not doing as well year over year. So that was one takeaway. The other takeaway, and I think I put something on this on LinkedIn. For me, it was the CAC portion of it, cost of acquisition of a customer, and that has steadily increased here. And increased because, and he didn't dive into it, I had to parse into this a little bit afterward, but so as a marketer, we're looking to acquire customers at a cost that's more effective or cheaper. And in this case, the price or the cost has gone up significantly. And the reason it's gone up is not necessarily because marketers are spending more than they have in the past. It's more about the growth has slowed so much that the cost of acquiring these customers now are significantly higher than in times past. And, I think that's a really key indicator, Meg, of kind of, and you and I were talking about this in the pre-show a little bit, of how marketers have to kind of read the room right now, because if growth has slowed, now's not the time to be introducing very large expenses or very large expenditures on, the shiny new platforms. Or it's a really challenging time, I think, for CMO, because on one hand, they're being told, hey, grow more. And on the other hand, you got to kind of read the room, and you almost have to do the activities with what you have on hand, is kind of the interpretation. So it was interesting to see all the numbers, but the CAC one was the one that stuck out the most for me.
Yeah, it's expensive to acquire a customer in a market where everyone is being super careful about what they're spending. And I think it also, it holds companies to a high standard of being able to show, going back to Jocko's point, right? Being able to show impact. Do you really help? If I put you in, what will I get? And can I promise that to my business? And especially with AI too, I think a lot of people do want to continue to be able to experiment with different tools. And the nice thing is often you can do that at a very affordable price point. But at a certain point, you're going to have to place your bets. And, the companies that deliver that impact are going to win. But you also made me think about something just now, John, when you were saying kind of it's challenging for CMOs. I think it really is. Any marketing leader is, probably being asked to find any money they can save if the revenue isn't coming in to meet, initial forecasts and budgets. And or people are just sort of being cautious and saying, well, we're okay now, but we don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months. So let's, start trimming now while we can. And I think the tricky thing about that too, though, is like you were saying, though, John, is then you've also got the situation where some companies are going to say, wait a minute, maybe we have a moment here where we should be doing some investments. So I would say keep an eye out, though, for competitors who or adjacent companies who might move into your space, who are going to be making some moves. Maybe that's acquisitions. Maybe that's, like you were saying with Salesforce, maybe that's a major change to the business while, sort of everyone's distracted by a million things. There may be people who are doubling down on changes and investments, and you can't lose sight of that. But the other thing I'd say is this is also a moment to be a bit ruthless with things that aren't delivering impact. But being honest about why. Is it the fault of the tech? Is it the fault of the service provider? Or is it something that is missing in terms of your strategic perspective? And that's something Yop will cover next week too, is there's no replacement for a strategy founded in, market understanding and buyer understanding and reality. And I think this is that moment to say, have we nailed our ICP? Have we been honest about who should we be selling to because we can deliver impact to them? Have we built products that have good fit for our market and for the need that we're trying to address? Or have we fallen down? Have we messed up in terms of service? Are there places where we're not being honest with ourselves? And moments where you need to retrench are actually good moments, I think, to reflect as well, to say, where are places where I'm spending money that's good money after bad? And it would actually be smarter for me not to spend that right now and to do the work to say why. And I think that's, that's also kind of a thing that CMOs can say, hey, it stinks that I can't put in more, but maybe it's also for me to be a bit introspective and do those. I always think of that quadrant, like high impact, high value, and difficulty. This is the moment to maybe take on the things that take a while, but are high impact and high value, that don't cost money. Making sense of your ICP doesn't really cost money, right? Being honest about where you got challenges in your messaging doesn't really cost money, right? It just takes brain power, and you've got that on your team. Use it.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point about ICP and kind of being honest with yourself. And that was the conversation. I think even Jeremy Donovan of Insight Ventures, who had like a breakout session, talked a lot about profitable, efficient growth. And for me, in my mind, I was always reconciling. And in fact, I think we did a poll on this a couple of weeks ago where I was asking about, are marketers compensated on the other side of the bow tie for upsell and cross-sell? There were 15 votes on that. Not one was compensated for cross-sell, upsell. So I was trying to reconcile that disconnect of upsell, cross-sell to kind of what I was hearing from Jeremy in his session. And one of the things that he talked about was the ICP and the focus of really honing in on that because it's likely going to be profitable and efficient. But he also mentioned that as marketers and salespeople, we're not really incented to focus on profitability and efficiency as much as we are on growth. And that to me was a bit of an eye opener as I was thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, we're primarily marketers. When we're pointing the gun, it's at the new logo acquisition. And we kind of do the upsell, cross sell off the side of our desk type thing. And then he went one step further where he through his portfolio companies, and I don't remember how many hundreds they have, over 300 or some, obscenely high number. He had a mathematical formulation around valuation. And to net out the valuation, there was a 1.7 time more value in growth than there was in profitability, even in today's environment. So it was kind of an odd thing of, okay, we're talking about profitable, efficient growth, yet what gets rewarded from marketing and their compensation is growth and new logo acquisition, like 100% from my informal survey on LinkedIn. And from a valuation perspective, that too. Now, could you get that growth from upsell, cross sell? Possibly. But I just thought it was an interesting conversation that he led with, that the whole growth thing is much more valued than the efficiency right now. Which,
well, and I think especially for earlier stage companies, I think you can have that thought process.
Right.
I think one thing I would encourage people who are in more mature or larger organizations to be thinking about, though, is it goes back to what I think, Bev Burgess does an amazing job covering in her new book. And what Inflection Group, I think, really provides some great data and insights on too, is this idea of you can't escape the 80-20 rule. Maybe early on you got your revenue, sort of distributed and you've got growth coming in because you're so new. But after a while, your revenue just gets tied up in a smaller and smaller number of companies. And unfortunately, that also introduces a high degree of risk, because if you lose one of them, right, which in a volatile market is not unlikely, it's really hard to find another one lined up to replace them if there aren't, if the stars don't align to do that for you. And you've probably also got a roster of companies who are, towards the lower part of your 20%, that's 80% of revenue, and then into the rest of your base who could be in that top base, but we're not focused on developing them because marketing doesn't get credit for it. It's because of the way marketing is compensated based on volume of net new logos in some cases, which is really, I understand why it is, because everything we put in place is designed around that model being the way that people look at the value of marketing. But I think the reality of the finances of most businesses is that it's just not the case, that that's the way you should be thinking about your revenue engine. And I would definitely encourage folks to, to also, in addition to the Winning by Design stuff, the Inflection Group stuff, and Bev's new book has some really, really good case studies of how, companies have thought about and embraced their 80-20 rule, and made the most of maximizing growth and expansion. But there are also some great examples of pursuit marketing in there where they're winning, massive contracts and net new logos. And what it takes to do that in these incredibly competitive markets at the top end of sort of B2B. And but I think it's, I understand why marketers say they're not compensated on cross-sell and upsell. It's super hard to show the part you play. That's just the reality of the nature of that work. But that said, it is probably the key to your profitability and your growth when you look at where revenue is coming from and where it's expected to come from going into next year. So something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, you definitely, when we see this with our client base too, marketers definitely need to participate in that because without the net revenue retention happening at 100% or greater, you're having to work twice as hard on the growth side. to make up for any of the lost existing client. And a lot of that comes down to product market fit and a lot of other factors too. And turnover and how well you're keeping in touch with, your economic buyer and your actual user. I mean, there's so many variables there, but you're right. Like you really have to watch that very carefully.
And the bigger the company, the more extreme the 80-20, right? And the longer you've been around, the more extreme the 80-20 and the bigger the risk. And that's, hopefully, and I would imagine, I mean, as people are looking at valuing companies too, if you've got a lot of revenue, even if you're small and you've got a lot of revenue tied up in a few customers who may or may not decide to stay with you, that's going to have an impact on future investors.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, the other, so Ray had a great conference. I mean, it was a half day session, which was perfect because we got to do other things for the remainder of the day. And then I did have a chance to pop into Salesforce, their world tour, which was their agent force. And normally that would be something I would skip altogether, but I was in town. I had a little bit of time. I'm like, I'll check it out. And the reason I would skip it is because they're usually so overwhelming and not a lot of value. It was like walking into a completely different company with this event. Salesforce has made a hard pivot toward AI and agent force. And I had some really rich dialogues around the role of AI, data. They had breakout sessions. They had big presentations. Interestingly enough, they did it, and because you're from the area, did it in the Javits Center, so they had a lot of headphones with people that went into a large auditorium, but they had multiple different sessions going on with headphones, and it was really effective because it forced you to listen to the speaker and not, be distracted in a lot of other things. That was more of the format. But the content was all about AI, all about their data cloud, and they didn't have the Informatica news announced, which just came out in the last couple of days. Now, that is going to change the landscape even further from a data perspective. But what they were messaging was they were talking a lot about Customer 360. And we've been hearing about that back when I had jet black hair, kind of like we've been talking about it forever. And the difference now, though, is AI can span the structured and unstructured data across multiple data silos. And with Informatica in the mix, on paper, they should be able to extract a lot of that data and be able to do a lot of data analysis, borderline like a competitor to a Snowflake or a Databricks with AI on top of things. I think one of the things that struck me there, and I know we only have a few minutes left, but one of the other things that struck me was they're reinventing themselves as almost like an AI company, and they were releasing a lot of point solutions as agents, some of which I thought were competitive to the system. So, for example, they had salespeople who were pitching me on AI SDRs, as if I didn't know what an AI SDR did, based on our own client experience. But I just listened to what they had to say. They are definitely going after, any AI use case they're going after in a very aggressive way. They also talked about specific vertical use cases. So like in the case of HR, they released some AI agents around HR. I know we've got a few HR clients that use Salesforce, but not necessarily AI. So it was just really interesting to see how deeply they were going after AI in a big way in this conference.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to see that, and thank you. I appreciate kind of hearing about that. And it does sound like interesting and sort of difficult times ahead for the people that are in the broader ecosystem to say, wait a minute, are we frenemies now? Maybe not even friends. That'll be interesting to see. And the Informatica announcement was definitely interesting too. So I think we're kind of coming up on time. I think we've got some pretty great guests coming up, in addition to a special edition with Yop next Wednesday, which I'm super excited about. We've got some amazing guests starting next Friday and really continuing through. Maybe let's just run through June for now.
Yeah, no. So the next couple guests are going to be outstanding. So we have Victoria Albert out of course, I'm going to forget where she's out of. I know she's out of Canada. Infuse. So Infuse has released some benchmark data around some marketing programs and kind of the challenges that marketers face. I heard her present at the Pavilion Conference about a month or so ago and reconnected with her. Really excited to have her join us. And then the following week, we've got another queen of ABM joining us, Heidi Bullock, who is actually the original queen of ABM because she was at Engagio. She's going to talk all things ABM. So really, really excited to have Heidi on. In fact, Heidi and I were on a panel probably about 90 days ago about ABM, and I was just blown away. Like I thought I knew a lot about ABM because this is what we do for a living. She really, really understands it. So super pumped to have her joining us. And then Kathleen Schwab's going to be rejoining us the 20th. She just released a book on marketing as well. So
yeah, and she's crushing it in terms of sales on Amazon. So good for Kathleen. Excited
yeah. So we'll I'm super excited about that. I think she was supposed to send you a book. I don't know if you got it yet or not.
And I can't. Okay. I've got it sitting on my table, ready to read.
Awesome. And then we wrap up June with a RevOps perspective. Kenoko from Path Factory. Now, Kenoko's been swimming around RevOps and marketing ops for quite some time. So she's been a longtime guest as well, or not guest, a kind of a viewer of our show. So, we flipped the script a little bit and we have asked her to come on and share what she's seeing from a RevOps perspective and maybe even share some AI as well. So I think our June is pretty much packed. And you said it was it 3:30 Eastern for Wednesday for you?
Wednesday, 3:30 Eastern. We'll send an update to everybody with the new time and a new link. And to folks who joined today, thanks. And we appreciate you being on the road with us.
Excellent. We'll see you next Friday.
All right. Happy Friday, everyone.